Welcome to this episode of Saulcast, where we're talking about Season 4, Episode 8 of Better Call Saul, titled Coushatta. We already recorded our instant take earlier in the week, so you'll want to go back and listen to that to hear our raw, instant reactions to the episode we recorded right after watching it. But today, we have our full recap and analysis for you, where we've taken some time to think about and digest the episode. I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
Let's get into it.
What about you, Michael?
What's the plan here, Kim?
What I'm gonna ask is impossible.
Don't worry. No one's gonna know about it.
Listen to me carefully. Think about what happens if something goes wrong.
In this episode, Mike and Werner take the boys out for the much-hyped R&R, and we find them at a strip club. Like, no surprise for us there, right? That's kind of what we expected.
Yeah.
At the strip club, Werner looks sort of lonely and out of place. I think Mike feels bad for him, so he takes him to a bar where they have a chat. They talk about their papas. Turns out Werner's dad created the Sydney Opera House. And we see Werner start to interact with some of the others in the bar there. Somebody orders a Hefeweizen, and Werner corrects him. It's pronounced Hefeweizen. Mike excuses himself.
I liked that because I've ordered Hefeweizen before. And although I didn't pronounce it that badly, this revealed that I also wasn't pronouncing it correctly either.
Yeah, if only you and I had seen this show 7 years ago, then the first time we ordered it, we would have pronounced it right.
Yeah, my whole life would be different.
Mike excuses himself to check on the boys, and we see that Kai is getting kicked out for touching one of the girls. They threaten to call the cops. Mike smooths things over, says, we're going to get rid of this guy, don't worry, pays off the guards, and everything's fine. At this point in the episode, did you think that we saw the thing that's going to go wrong with the Germans this episode, or were you expecting more to happen?
I was expecting more to happen because I guess I just believed that Mike would be able to get them out of it, so it didn't feel that dangerous of a situation. But if cops were called, I mean, that could turn pretty bad.
Exactly. So I thought that this was not the thing that's going to go wrong, but it was just further hinting at Kai being a problem. But a few seconds later...
Right, as if we need any more hints of that.
Yeah, as if I don't think there's many Kai defenders out there at this point. Mike goes back to the bar, and he sees Werner yucking it up with the guy from the bar earlier and another guy. He's talking to them about the construction project that he's working on. He draws it out, and he's not telling them that he's building a meth lab, but he is talking about the project. And Mike finds him there, basically tells him, time to go, and pulls him away.
I was very disappointed in Werner.
Did you see any signs up to this point that he was a risk?
Only in the sense that he kept defending the boys, saying that they're good boys, and trying to reassure Mike even when there wasn't really any good grounds to do so. Yeah,
at this point, though, they hadn't... I agree. He definitely goes easy on the quote unquote the boys, but I didn't get the feeling that he was a talker and that he would be the one to, especially after he kind of painted Kai that way. So this was somewhat surprising.
They sort of set it up when he first started correcting that guy in his pronunciation of the beer. I started to think this might be a problem. There's just no reason to draw. It's already risky enough that they're going out in public. The whole point of this elaborate setup was that they would never, like we said before, the sun doesn't even look like it touches their skin, and now they're going out in public just because of how bad the morale was getting. Why push your luck and risk it any further by even interacting with someone else?
This whole German storyline is us watching them and continuously getting hints at what might go wrong. And it's just funny that we're all watching knowing something really bad is going to happen. At first you think it's Kai, maybe that was a red herring. Now we think it's Werner, but for all we know, that's also a red herring and something else is going to go wrong. But we'll see how it develops. We see Mike and Werner, the boys, back in their living quarters. They're all in high spirits, so the R&R worked. Mike has a stern talking to with Werner. He tells him to think about what happens if something goes wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And Werner assures him that he understands.
Yeah, you were right. I'm sorry, Mike. I had too much beer. And I may have said more than I should have. Listen to me. Carefully. The man we're working for is very serious. Think about the precautions we take to keep everything that goes on here quiet. Think about how much money you're making. Think about what happens if something goes wrong. Do you understand what I am saying to you? I do understand. And I'm sorry to cause you any problem. You have my word. Nothing like this will happen again.
Does Werner understand?
I don't think he fully gets it. I think he realizes the implications are serious, but something about his tone and his mannerisms sort of reminded me of Walter White in early Breaking Bad. He's getting involved in this stuff and doesn't realize how high the stakes really are. It seems like the first time he sees someone get violent, it legitimately surprises him. And it looks like Werner doesn't realize the threat to him and his compatriots could be physical.
Mike tries to convey to him who he's working for. He says, you're working for a serious man. But the way that Werner is acting, I don't get the impression that he is afraid of Gus. He is not nearly as afraid as he should be, or else he would be towing the line a lot more. But on the other side, I think Mike can do a better job of conveying that. Like, stop trying to get Werner to read between the lines. You know, he's a serious man. You got to tell him, this guy tortured a Kawati. Well, later in the episode, Mike is meeting with Gus. They're back underground in the currently under construction super lab. Mike gives him the update. He tells them that they're pretty much at the halfway point right now, way behind schedule. It's unclear at the start of the conversation whether or not Gus is aware of Werner's recent transgression, but then he asks Mike, and Werner? And Mike tells him, I gave him the come to Jesus. He screwed up. He knows it. Says it won't happen again. Gus asks him, and what do you say? Mike assures him, I got eyes on him, but yeah, he's good.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be a mistake.
And that's my question, because I don't think they're showing us all of this just to tell us here's how the super lab was built. They're not showing it just because it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Werner. I have to assume that all of this is for the purpose of developing Mike's character in some way. So what do you think that he's going to learn from this experience? I
think that, if I'm going to think from the perspective of what would be the hardest hitting thing, Mike will have to kill Werner. That's what I see as, I'm not saying that will definitely happen, but that seems like the most impactful thing that they could have Mike do in terms of character development. And they even tell, why do we need to know that Werner's father built the Sydney Opera House? In part, it's to contrast it with what he's doing, which is, what Werner is doing is in some ways, it's still a feat of engineering, and it's a huge challenge, and it's a big project, and it is something he could be proud of from the perspective of craftsmanship. But in comparison to what his father did, he is working like underground, illicitly, doing stuff that he can't really claim ownership of or really leave as a legacy the same way his father could. So what better way to show, I don't know, a tragedy than not only is this what he's working on compared to his dad, but it even just ends with him getting killed and no one knows about it.
The only thing that puts into doubt for me that Mike is going to have to kill Werner is that the lesson he takes away from that feels a lot like don't take any half measures, which we know is something he learns before Breaking Bad. But thinking back to Breaking Bad, when he gives the monologue, he does tell the story of how he learned that lesson. I don't remember all the details, but I think it had to do with somebody that was a domestic abuser, beating their wife or their girlfriend. Maybe that was a made-up story. Maybe this is truly where he learns that lesson, or at least begins to learn that lesson. But if I didn't have that knowledge of what happens, later on, then I would speculate that Mike is going to have to kill Werner. But hopefully, because we see it coming, something different will happen.
Yeah, I think you might have to, and I also think what you're referring to happened back when if it even happened at all, it was back when he was in Philadelphia on the police force. When you talked about Mike learning a lesson about half measures through Werner, I see that as unlikely because Mike seems like the type of person who has learned all the lessons he needs at this point. I think he already understands the idea of half measures and full measures, but in this case, he's kind of working on behalf of Gus as his employer, and he can't just take any kind of drastic action right now.
That's it for Mike and Werner this episode. As I said before, we're continuing to watch to just see what's going to go wrong. We saw some of it this episode with Kai, mainly with Werner. Are those red herrings? Or is Werner going to be the big problem here? We'll see.
Moving on to Jimmy and Kim's plots this episode. I enjoyed this plot line so much. It had the best mix of everything we like about these characters. There was good, just from Kim's perspective, there was a lot of fun, like legal drama when we see her in the boardroom with her associates taking on the prosecutor. It had all the elements that I kind of enjoyed from earlier in Better Call Saul, which was sometimes it legitimately just felt like I'm watching a legal drama. So we had a taste of that. Then we got to see them scheming and her and Jimmy working together. We got to see them in a situation where it felt like their relationship was completely doomed, which is how we felt for a while. Then we got to see the total reverse. So their plot was an emotional roller coaster for me in the best way possible.
Yeah, the episode had me laughing hysterically at some points, had me very tense at some points, and intrigued throughout.
So we see Jimmy getting ready to leave Albuquerque. He's kind of packing up the car. Again, there's some obvious tension between Jimmy and Kim, and he's traveling to Houston. And at first, it's not clear exactly where he's going. I thought maybe he's getting his... This would be very weird timing, but maybe he's getting his legal license back, and there's like one place in the state that he has to go in order to get that done, and maybe it's just a faraway kind of trip he has to take. That clearly wasn't the right interpretation. So we see him on the bus, and he's writing it turns out he's going to Louisiana. He's writing all these fake letters. We see his hand cramping up, and he's holding the pencil and these markers in all these different ways, either to alleviate some of his hand pain or to make the penmanship look different. Then we find out he started hiring other people on the bus to pitch in and writing all these letters for Huel, which is a total Jimmy move.
Yeah, and as soon as I realized what was going on, well, first off, it was awesome when he recruited other people on the bus to work for him. I thought that was hilarious. But right away, when you realize what he's doing here, knowing Kim is complicit in all this, already I started to really question that, because this feels, you and I speculated last episode that Kim was going to do something sort of in the gray area legally, but this to me is outside the gray area. It's clearly over the line and super risky. If anyone finds out that she committed this fraud, I would speculate that her legal career is either over, or at least she would have a suspension at a similar level that Jimmy's facing.
Definitely. And at the end of the episode, when Jimmy is talking with Kim outside of the office that he's looking at, he lists off all the different laws that they broke when they did this scheme. So yeah, this was crazy risky, and you have to wonder, why did she do it? Because it seems like at first at the end, it's clear she really enjoyed it and seems to kind of get off on these sorts of things. Yeah. But you didn't see that glimmer of anticipation in her eyes when she first agreed to do this. It seemed like she was doing it out of some kind of sense of obligation to Jimmy as, all right, well, I'll do this one last job and then we are through. That's how it felt at first, but it's such a big risk. I don't even know why she did that.
She did it out of obligation for Jimmy at first. I think that's no question. But once she was in it, she got a taste of something. And you and I speculated on what that was. We thought maybe she just didn't want to lose. That made sense for a bit. But this episode, because she wants to keep doing something like this, it seems like it's not just about winning. It had something to do with breaking the rules. And we've seen that side of her before, but it seems like it's more profound than we realized. And I wonder if she's finding that the cases she wanted to take to give her fulfillment, maybe they're not fulfilling her as much as she thought. And now the breaking the rules Giselle side of her is starting to feel more like where she wants to be.
I was also very impressed by Jimmy's work ethic, as I always am. You know, we see him working on the bus from morning all the way through night. You know, it's dark, and he's that one jerk on the bus who keeps the light on the whole time, and he's just going and continuing to write all these letters. When he sets his mind to something, he doesn't stop.
And that's a quality that Howard noticed in him years ago. I forget what he used to call him, something involving speed or hard work, but it definitely rings true. We've said it before, when he sets his mind to something, he can be so productive. To have the focus to write all those letters all day, basically not sleep, and then just keep going, no naps or anything, it's very impressive.
Yeah. And in addition to just his impressive work ethic, what we were talking about with him teaming up with Kim in this episode, they're like an unstoppable team. And so it's exciting to see them working together on something like this. This is one of the most risky and just elaborate schemes that we've ever seen pulled off on this show. And I don't think either one of them could have done it without the other, and it came together really well. And so it shows you, you know, it's in some ways it's bad because they're doing something that's pretty unethical, but at the same time, it's amazing how much they can get done with it when they actually cooperate.
Yeah, it's so risky. It seems so easy to disprove. The whole time they were writing the letters, I kept thinking to myself, a 2-second Google search to show that none of these things happened, or calling any one of the people that wrote those letters, you could so quickly see through the lies. But Jimmy and Kim, they thought of everything.
Jimmy gets to the post office in Louisiana, and they do a great job just setting up the atmosphere there. Like you see that token dude just hanging out on a bench with his dog. The dog, I think, even has a limp. They do this thing where they gloss over some of the just basic procedural steps of something that's happening on the show, and they always use it, I think, artfully. So here we see Jimmy get to Louisiana, and you can just imagine what the interaction must have been like in the post office. You know, it's this tiny post office. They probably don't get a lot of gigantic batches of mail. And then here he comes in like Santa Claus with this huge stack of letters. And so I'm sure that would have been funny to watch, but they also just do a great job setting the scene from the outside and just doing this very slow camera zooming in throughout the process until Jimmy's done and he walks out.
I thought it was a good thing that they went to what looks like a mom and pop post office, if those exist, because you think if he goes to a big city, to a post office that's probably got a lot of security and cameras, I think they purposely went somewhere far away, went to a post office where it's pretty unlikely that someone's going to connect the dots that, hey, a lawyer dropped off about 1,000 letters the other day, which might have had something to do with this situation we find ourselves in. By the way, where in Louisiana was it, Adam?
Was it Coushatta?
Nice. Wanted to see if you'd pronounce it right.
Well, we spent so much time practicing.
Yeah.
I was prepared. We have the title sequence for the episode, and I'm always watching these to see if I can learn anything. And usually I can't figure out what they're trying to say. This time I'll make an attempt. So we see looks like the ground of a desert. So you see like some sand and a footprint, and over that is a tie and then a tarantula crawling around. And all I could think of was the tarantula in Breaking Bad in the episode where they do the train heist and Todd ends up having to shoot that kid. The kid was playing with the tarantula. What do you make of this?
I thought you were going to give us an interpretation, but really you just...
I will after I give you a little attempt here.
Oh, you want me to take a stab at it first? Okay, I'll bite. The Todd kills the kid because the kid was a witness and he did what had to be done. Werner is the kid in this episode, and Mike is going to have to do what needs to be done. And the spider, or the tarantula, represents that.
That's fair. That's a fair interpretation. So do you think that tie might be like a Werner's tie or something?
Oh, I forgot about the tie element.
Yeah, so because the tie, to me, I just assumed it was like a Jimmy tie or a Saul tie. So I thought this could just represent... This is a lame interpretation. I just thought it could represent Jimmy basically doing something immoral. Which I guess is every episode, but... I also think here's the most likely explanation for all these openers. They just think of what's some stuff that's loosely associated with either Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad that sets the mood, sets the environment, and let's just film it and see if we can find something cool.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah. But it's a fun exercise. You know, we get to see the way that we think about the show and see what kind of associations we have with whatever's in that starting.
Yeah.
Kim looks at Huell's case, and she's got these big headphones on and cannot hear Jimmy over her music. He's trying to go out and see if she wants her. He's about to leave and wants to know if she wants him to bring anything back for dinner, and she declines. Well, at first she doesn't hear him, and eventually he gets her attention. She doesn't want anything and says she'll just kind of scrounge around. So she really doesn't like him at this point.
Yeah, we get another... There's been a lot of shots of Jimmy sadly looking at Kim, and we have another one of those in this scene right before he leaves the room. So he's just starting to accept things are over between me and Kim.
And one thing we talk about all the time is how much this show likes to surprise us. So I can't believe that we just took it at face value that Jimmy and Kim were done. Because they kept pushing it on us. They kept making it so crystal clear, especially in this next scene when we see Jimmy at the nail salon. He's doing something with the phones. So the lady who owns the salon asks if Jimmy's wife is mad at him. And then she actually seems to feel some sympathy for him, which she hasn't before, which is funny because there have been many times when he was worthy of sympathy, and if she could just let him have had some cucumber water, it would have made a big difference, but she would never allow it. But here, she really seems to feel bad for him, and she goes and gets him a drink, and then I think she enjoys feeling like she can tell him what to do, or that she can kind of chastise him, but also maybe help him in the process. Like when she says, get rich quick schemes never work. It's both a way to shame him, but also a way to maybe point him in the right direction. So here she pours him the drink. She says, take her to dinner, bring flowers, go to a nice place with a waiter and a tablecloth, and say sorry, and make sure to say that you're sorry twice. And I thought it was funny that she needed to specify it was a place with a waiter, as if, to apologize in some kind of big romantic gesture, they'll go to like a drive-through.
That's exactly what I was about to say, that I'm going to... I want to give somebody that advice next time I'm asked for it. Like, where should I take this girl? I would say you got to take her somewhere fancy that has a waiter.
It wouldn't be wrong. Just maybe not specific enough.
I was also trying to remember if the owner of the nail salon was always acting in this capacity, handing out sage advice. And like you said before, I don't think she ever had the best relationship with Jimmy. She always never treated him badly, but never treated him that great either. And I wonder if it's just a matter of, what's the saying? Like, being apart makes the heart grow fonder, or something like that.
That sounds right. I've never heard it, though.
Really? Well, Jimmy, he moved on from the nail salon. He's been gone for a while. I think maybe she misses him a little bit. And so she does actually feel bad for him, and that might explain why she's being a little warmer. I mean, I use the term warmer loosely, but she's being a little bit better to him and trying to give him advice.
Yeah, I mean, they're acting almost like friends. So so Jimmy says that, we might be past that. There, it might be too late for apologies. And as the viewer, I'm totally with him and I agree. So her response to that is to say, I'll leave the bottle. And then Jimmy goes back and starts messing around with the phones again. At this point, did you have an idea what Jimmy was doing with the phones?
I had no idea. I don't even remember having any speculation. I sort of just took for granted that he wanted to get out of the apartment and get away from Kim. But I didn't see what was coming next.
Yeah, I thought he just wanted something to do outside of the house because he felt so uncomfortable being there. So maybe he was just going back to his phones and maybe there's something he needs to do with the phones before he can sell them. So this was just something he was working on the side just to be productive. Next, Kim meets with the prosecutor, who is Susan Erickson. And Susan is very, very tough and won't back down. Kim is there with a team of associates trying to intimidate Susan. And all of this is pretty intense because for a case this small, you would never expect to see so many people involved and have it become such a big issue. And Susan doesn't really understand why Kim is making this into such a big thing. And meanwhile, Kim is threatening to, subpoena all the local businesses and check their security cameras to see what happened and to dig deeper into the police officer's record. They're even threatening civil litigation and saying that they're going to contact the ACLU because of Huell's rights being violated.
And throughout the episode, I kept remembering that at the center of all this chaos is Huell, and that just made me laugh.
Yeah, there's this big orbit around Huell.
Yeah. I also felt bad for Susan. This sort of reminded me of when Kim was going up against that other prosecutor that didn't really have much of a spine that she was very easily able to beat. When she was going up against Susan last episode, she started to kind of waver a bit, but now she's back in full force, and once again, we see her in David versus Goliath mode, where she's Goliath, and I feel bad for Susan the same way I felt bad for that other prosecutor.
It's funny to think about Huell being at the center of all this, especially because we don't actually see him this episode, and the whole time I'm wondering, where's Huell in all this? I guess he's just hanging out and waiting. He's basically putting his trust in Jimmy and Kim at this point and hoping that they're going to be able to get him out of this.
He's just hanging out. He's just doing what Huell does.
We find out that all those letters Jimmy sent have arrived because the judge calls Kim and Susan into the office and says, "Are you prosecuting Santa Claus?" And so he's got all these letters from people he describes as a bunch of yahoos, a bunch of swamp-dwelling do-gooders. And I thought that the judge, they cast that guy perfectly. And seeing him grumpy, it's like he was born to be this grumpy dude.
He reminded me of you a little bit.
I'm not thrilled about that.
The way that when you don't like somebody, you go hard on them. I've called you out on it before in earlier episodes where you'll refer to people as lowlives, dregs. So I think you saw a little bit of yourself in this character, and that's why you're so complimentary of. Yeah, they cast this guy really well. I think this guy should get his own show. Maybe he's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't get an Emmy, I'll be very disappointed. We also find out that all these yahoos from Louisiana, in his words, are planning to come to the trial, which is going to be a huge pain in the ass for this guy. They want to avoid this, and we see the prosecutor. She's steadfast and is not ready to give up. So she's back at her office. She's looking at these letters. She's talking to all the other people she works with about all the information they need to dig up on Huell. They need to figure out what is it he could have done to earn the love of his entire community. So she calls some of the numbers on these letters that they got, and the first person that actually answers says that Huell is a pillar of our church. And again, just thinking about this lie that they're crafting of Huell, being this community person and this big participant in the church is It's just such an ironic kind of lie.
She goes to the church website, and there's a few pictures of Huel, like, tending to a garden. He's got this big smile on his face. I think that's like a screen cap I want to take from the show, and if I ever need to lift my spirits, I'm just going to look at that picture.
Yeah. And we even see on the website there's these fake donations coming in, and it reminded me of the SaveWalterWhite.com, the site that Walt Jr. made in Breaking Bad to try to raise money for Walt, which also featured, in a way, fake donations because it ended up getting used by Walter as a money laundering scheme. That was Saul Goodman's idea. So here we're seeing a little bit of the roots of this understanding about ways of moving money around, I guess, in a very loose way.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the writers were conscious of that. When they were trying to think of what they could do in this scene, they might have remembered that scheme from Breaking Bad and put this here as a seed for that.
The prosecutor keeps on making these calls, and eventually one of them gets answered by Jimmy. And I wonder if this was an intentional reference to the meme, New Phone Who Dis. He answers the phone with this southern drawl, and he's like, who dis? And he starts talking about how Huel is a hero. And it turns out that it's because he put out a fire at the church. Not only that, it was a fire during Bible study full of old people. Oh, and the fire was at night. And why was it at night? It's because the old people like to study the Bible at night so that they can get right with God in case they die at night. It was very elaborate. It seemed like he was just digging a little bit of a deeper hole as he kept explaining it.
Yeah, while he's doing that, one of the people that he's working with, those 3 kids from the film crew, point at the whiteboard, and it says at the top of it, "Keep it simple, stupid,"
Yeah.
And he's not doing anything like that. When I said that I was nervous this episode, this was peak nervousness here. I was laughing out loud, but at the same time, my heart was racing because there's so much on the line here. And because we're seeing both sides of it, it feels like at any moment Susan is going to see right through it. But I never should have doubted Jimmy's skills. This is what he does best.
I was very nervous too, and less to do with doubt for Jimmy and more to do with these kids that he's working with. We don't know how effective they are. I remember they ended up doing a good job with the commercial, but one of the points of comedy throughout that whole process was that these kids are hard to work with. But Jimmy is very good at finding the right person for the job, and he's good at connecting talent to the places where it's needed. So we, like you said, we shouldn't have doubted him. He knew who to hire for this role, and he did a great job. Jimmy steps away for a bit and basically reminds them he paid them for the whole day, so they should hang out and answer. So they should hang out and answer every third call that comes in. And again, I was very nervous about that, but we don't even know if any more calls came in. However, we do see that Jimmy goes to the court and kind of looks through the window of a door and sees Susan, the prosecutor, arguing with Kim. It doesn't really look good. I wasn't very confident when I was watching that. When Kim leaves the room, she looks like she's storming out of there and basically walks right past Jimmy. And I thought things were going to be bad. Either maybe the prosecutor found out that this was fake or expressed her suspicions to Kim. Maybe she believed it but wasn't backing down. I just didn't think that anything that was going to come next would have been positive. But they walk into the stairwell, and we're instantly given the sense that everything is great, and Kim just starts making out with Jimmy really hard.
When we're seeing from Jimmy's perspective that Kim is talking to Susan, I thought that I saw at one point Kim sort of lean back, cross her arms, and smile. So I thought she got good news. When she stormed out, though, I read that as, "All right, Jimmy, we're done." But clearly, I was very wrong about that.
Oh, I see. So she's like, "I got the job done, and I feel good about that. But you and me, we're finished. I'm out of here."
Right. Yeah. So this was what I thought was really funny about this is that Jimmy has come across as pretty oblivious in picking up on signals from people around him. We kept feeling like, does he really believe that him and Kim are going to get to work together? Does he not see that their relationship is falling apart? And in the episode where he finally acknowledges it, he spells it out, he tells the lady at the salon, I think it's over. That's the episode where we find out that we were totally wrong.
I think I should just give up on trying to predict what's going to happen on this show. I have I may be like right 1 out of 10 times.
Which is crazy because it's a prequel. We literally know how it ends, yet they keep finding ways to surprise us.
Right. And what, we see them wake up in bed together, and Kim is looking at Jimmy with serious affection in her eyes, and she's like gently with her fingers, like kind of touching his chest, and she's asking him to do his Louisiana accent impression again.
It's like I'm in the bayou.
Yes, well, I got crawdads in my pants.
That's not a thing.
It's a thing that happens to you when you sit in the bayou.
The phones were genius.
The phones.
Yeah.
Well, the phones were a touch. This was all you, start to finish.
Turns out Huel is only going to get 4 months probation, which is exactly what that first kid that Kim defended got sentenced with for throwing, I think it was like a brick or something like that through a shop's window, breaking a shop's window. He got 4 months probation. So one like petty vandal gets as much time as Huel in terms of probation, and Huel technically assaulted a police officer, even if it is a lot more complicated than that. And Kim is asking Jimmy, what he's doing that day. Just a normal conversation the way couples do, just, what are you up to today? Which made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, because it's like the first time in a while that we've seen Kim actually care what Jimmy's up to.
Especially now that she knows that he's up to things that are somewhat nefarious. So the fact that she's expressing interest, it's not just on the surface, it makes you feel warm because she wants to know what her partner is going to be up to that day, but it seems like she is not only accepting of what Jimmy's doing, but actually intrigued by it and wants to hear about it.
Right. It's almost like she looks up to him as she is for the first time in a while seeing him as talented and competent. And you can see it in her eyes, and that's one of the reasons she wants to know what he's up to that day.
I also think maybe some jealousy. He's up to some fun stuff today, and she wants to hear about it.
Yeah, she's fantasizing, which makes sense because in the next scene, we see her in a meeting with Mesa Verde, and she just looks very withdrawn and distant. And she just has this little discussion about one of the people at Mesa Verde. He wants to change some designs for a new place they're building, and she basically just has to say that it's not possible. Then we start to hear that dark music again, the same music that we hear. I think it's either the same or it's similar music to what we hear when she is first hearing about Mesa Verde's plans to expand, and it starts off with this kind of weird ambient, sentimental feeling music, and then it kind of turns dark and unpleasant feeling. And we heard that when she was first hearing about Mesa Verde's plans to expand. We hear it again here. We also hear it another time in this episode when Nacho is looking at the money in his safe. So it's clear that she is not really that happy with what she's doing here at Mesa Verde, but instead of longing for a life of defending people against an unjust system, I think right now she's just longing for the same excitement that she just had with Jimmy.
I would add one more layer to that. The scene where she tells the guy, no, it's not feasible to change the designs at this point, I don't think the only thing we should read into there is that she's longing to do something else. But in the past, I don't think she would have said no to him. He clearly is taken off guard by hearing her so quickly give up on the idea. So we're also seeing that her heart's just not in it anymore, and she's not fighting as hard. And I guess that just links back to the lack of passion for this that you already noted.
Next, Jimmy is looking at another potential office, and it's another hellhole, so to speak. We see it's got a hole in the wall and it's leaking, but at least there's no more rodent problem. That was taken care of. Then Kim shows up, and that was a very pleasant surprise. She's out there having a cigarette, and that kind of sets the tone for this whole scene because it reminded me of back in the day when they were both working at HHM, and they would go down in the parking garage and hang out there and smoke together. And that was, at the time, that felt like their way to get away from everything at HHM, and it almost felt like their own little secret kind of thing that they had going together.
It was good to see again, but at the same time, the way that I see what Kim is going through here is the same way that I see a drug user that's been clean for a long time getting a taste and then relapsing. And it's all the more clear with her smoking a cigarette, where she literally is partaking in a drug that, at least to our knowledge, she hasn't done in a while.
Jimmy isn't picking up on this necessarily, and he basically says, what we did was nuts, and I dumped it all in your lap, and I'm done with all that. It was way too risky. He can't shut his mouth because he's just profusely spewing out all these apologies, and I think he really does feel bad for pulling her into this, and he probably especially feels bad now that he has her affection again. He doesn't want to screw it up or risk losing it. So he's just saying everything he can to try to put this in the past and maybe get back on the good trajectory that they felt they once had.
Kim, don't worry. No one's going to know about it. It'll be like it never happened. And also, I agree, we are totally done with all that. Over and out. No more.
Let's do it again.
This is crazy. This totally changes the dynamic between Jimmy and Kim in such an interesting way, because never in a million years did I think that I would see Kim as bad for Jimmy. But going back to the earlier metaphor I used, where Kim is like a drug user who is relapsing, sometimes you see people in a relationship and their partner is an enabler. And I think Kim is actually an enabler in this situation, pushing Jimmy to do more nefarious deeds like the one they pulled off with all the letters for Huel. So it'll be so interesting to see how this develops, what it means for Kim, and does it mean that Kim is playing a bigger role in actively pushing Jimmy towards the Saul Goodman character, rather than Jimmy just reacting to something bad happening to Kim and then turning to the dark side like I think most of us expected.
Yeah, my mind has gone wild with all the possibilities here, because in my head I thought we're so close to the end for Jim and Kim. We're probably barely gonna see her after this season. I thought they're gonna break up and she will basically become some kind of peripheral character, or maybe she'll still be involved but in an adversarial role. Now I think I'm wondering, maybe they're even together through Breaking Bad and our assumptions were wrong. For all we know, she is kind of the brains behind his operation, or she is like a legal shield for him. Because Saul likely needs a lawyer too. He probably doesn't always just defend himself. I think most lawyers still have a lawyer for themselves. Who knows how long they go on to work together?
I always joked about maybe Kim is in Breaking Bad, she's just between scenes, but this is the first time where I actually think that's a legitimate possibility, and we've already seen them show us a scene that takes place during Breaking Bad. We saw that a couple of episodes ago. How cool would it be to see Kim in a scene that takes place during the time period of Breaking Bad? That's a possibility. It might even happen in the next 2 episodes before the season ends.
That would be awesome, and I would love if they did that. At first, my reaction to this maybe a few episodes ago would have been to say not only is it unrealistic that they would still be together during Breaking Bad just because we had no evidence of it, but also it would feel like they're shoehorning it in there and it wouldn't really feel right. But I feel differently about it now. I really want them to stay together because I like the schemes that they can pull off, and it brings out the worst in both characters ethically, but it brings out the best in both characters in terms of what we like to see as an audience.
Yeah, they I think to cap it off, they took Jimmy and Kim in such an interesting direction. I could not be happier with how that storyline is turning out. In this episode, Nacho has returned, but he is not the same.
And neither are his bowels.
As far as we know, they're fully functioning, but we'll see if they address that in later episodes.
Next week's cold open will just be Nacho getting up from the toilet and you hear a flush.
And then he looks at the camera and winks and says, "Don't worry, it's all good down there."
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for.
I apologize to our listeners for that comment. We see Nacho back at the restaurant where they have people come in and they collect all their drug money. We've got Domingo, also known as Crazy 8, sitting up front doing the collecting. Somebody comes in and is light on what they owe. Domingo gives him a stern talking to, and he says, "Hey, you're light." The guy says, "Don't worry, I'll bring you more next week." And he goes, "Yeah, you're damn right you will."
Which is not something Hector would have ever put up with.
No, and Nacho, like I said, he's come back, but he's got a bit of an edge to him. So he calls the guy back to talk to Nacho, and he has him lean down. And then he grabs an earring and rips it out of his ear.
That guy was asking for it. This poor man's Vin Diesel looking dude. You couldn't not notice those big gauges he had in his ears. I definitely didn't consciously think that one of them will be ripped out, but my attention was on them.
Yeah, you and I talked already about how, let me tell you a word of advice for people. If you're going into the drug business or any business where violence is a possibility, don't do the piercings. It's too much of a target. You're basically wearing weapons for other people to use against you at all times. So what do you think has happened that has made Nacho so hardened? Because in the past, I don't think we would have seen him so quickly turn to violence. He was probably as hesitant as Domingo was to actually assert strength and dominance the way that Nacho just did.
So it's a good thing that he did this, because we find out later in the episode that there are some other Salamancas who have their eyes on Nacho and this whole operation. So if any sign that Nacho is weak or doesn't really have his heart in this or care about protecting the Salamanca's assets, any sign like that will just make his situation worse. So I think what he's doing here is just playing the role really well. I don't think that this necessarily hardened him into being a more violent person necessarily. It's more that he, like we see, he's looking at the safe later. He's looking at those fake IDs he has for himself and his dad. He is focused on self-preservation. And the thing he can do best to preserve himself is to look like he really, really cares about the Salamanca's business.
I completely agree. I think he has probably hardened to some degree, but I don't think he's a more violent person than he was before. Like you said, he's playing a role because he wants to get out of this, and he needs to make sure there's no suspicion drawn to him. He needs to make sure he doesn't rock the apple cart, nothing goes wrong, so he needs to play the role right. And I think the edge that he has now has maybe just made him more tolerant of the violence. He's better able to take it, but he doesn't want to do it. I don't get that impression.
Right, and ultimately he picked a pretty, as bad as it looks and sounds, he picked a pretty benign thing to do to this guy.
Yeah, it's kind of the best of both worlds. It looks bad, draws a lot of blood, probably hurts pretty good, but it's not a grievous injury. The guy's going to be fine. You already hinted at it, but in the next scene, Nacho comes back home to a sweet house that kind of reminds me of the home that Gene lives in now, just in that it's one of those houses where a lot of the walls are windows, so as the camera pans across it, you can see everything that's going on in there. We see he has a couple of girls that appear to be living on his couch, and we see a pipe that's probably used to smoke meth, I would guess. Nacho comes in, the girls offer to make him dinner, he tosses them some drugs, they ask him if he's going to smoke with them, doesn't answer. Like you said, he walks over to the safe to put money away, and when he does that, a little bag falls out with 2 fake Manitoba IDs for him and his father. So we see that he has an escape path. My question for you is, do you think that this escape plan is something he's actively working towards, or is it just a just-in-case type of thing that he's saving in his back pocket if all goes to hell?
I think it's a just-in-case thing he has in his back pocket. I think he fantasizes or toys with the idea of fleeing, but if he was going to do it, he would have done it by now. So it's going to take more to get him to actually act. Right now he's in this like middle ground where he thinks about it, but nothing is triggering him to actually go and do it. And I don't think you'll need something new to happen before he actually makes that decision. And by then it might be too late.
Earlier, in an earlier episode, his dad asks him, when are you getting out of this business? And he says soon. So do you think he's essentially given up on that at this point?
I don't think he's given up on getting out of the business. I think him looking at those IDs shows that this really is what he wants to do. Maybe he's just waiting for the right opening here. Especially now with this new guy looking over him from the Salamancas, that might just make it even harder to get out. And he's being squeezed from all directions now. He's got the Salamancas on his ass. He's in Gus's back pocket, and I'm sure his mind is still on getting out of this mess.
Yeah, I think his mind is working to figure out when's the right time to get out. How am I going to get out? I don't know if he thinks Manitoba is necessarily the right answer, but he certainly fantasizes about it. I think that's clear.
Do you think Jimmy is going to be able to help him? Do you think it's going to come to him needing Jimmy's assistance?
Possibly. It is so strange how this show has multiple storylines that can go so long without intersecting. So part of me wants to say that at some point their paths have to intersect, and you could see Jimmy helping him with... Of anybody we've seen in the show, Jimmy would probably have the most expertise, just being a lawyer, on how to go about moving with a new identity and all that. So I could see it happening. I'm not ready to say that I think it will happen, though.
Mm-hmm. Here's one other way that it could happen. We touched on this a bit in the instant take. Domingo, also known as Crazy 8 in Breaking Bad, we know that he is a snitch and will inform to the DEA about his rivals in the drug trade as a way of cleaning out competition. What if something happens there where maybe Nacho gets snitched on and actually needs legal defense, and by the time this happens, maybe Saul is Saul. Maybe Jimmy got his law degree back and he's able to help Nacho.
I would be somewhat surprised if that happens, only because as a viewer, that would really only make sense having the foreknowledge that Domingo does that sort of thing in Breaking Bad. I could see them, if they start to develop the relationship between Nacho and Domingo more, so that when Domingo betrays Nacho, it has a little bit more impact, then I could see it happening. But if they stay at the level they're at now, where they just sort of interact here and there and Domingo's not a big character, then I don't see it going that way. But we'll see. Over the next couple episodes, if Crazy 8 takes a bigger role, then I'll start to think that there's some merit to what you're speculating. Later in the episode, Nacho returns to the restaurant. There's loud music playing, so already you feel like there's something off here. When he walks in, Domingo gives him a look where he gestures to a guy sitting in the corner, basically to say, something's not right here, look out for this guy. Nacho walks to the back, to the kitchen, and sees a guy with a mustache cooking, seeming very jolly. And then he turns to Nacho, offers him the food, says a bunch of stuff, but the most important part is probably, you're going to love this. I made it just for you. You're going to die.
And that guy definitely knows what he's doing.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he's like, oh, wait, did I just say you're going to die? Oh, I didn't mean that. Sorry, I know how that came off. No, he knows what he's doing. Nacho turns it down, and then this guy introduces himself as Eduardo, but you can call him Lalo, and he refers to his food as a family recipe. Nacho says, Salamanca family.
Did you just say Lalo?
Yeah. You look like you want to say something. You look like you just connected some dots. Yeah, what's Lalo?
Holy crap. Wow. Do you remember what Saul Goodman says when Walt and Jesse kidnap him in Breaking Bad and put a bag over his head and put him on his knees in the desert and threaten him?
No.
In season 2 of Breaking Bad, when Saul gets kidnapped by Walter and Jesse and they have him in the desert, Saul assumes that the person who kidnapped him is Lalo, and he's begging for his life. And he says something like, "It wasn't me, it was Ignacio," which as we know, that's Nacho. And so what this means is, first of all, that years down the line in Breaking Bad, when he is Saul Goodman and he's working with Walt and Jesse, or he's about to start working with them, he thought it was feasible that this Eduardo character, also known as Lalo, would have some reason to kidnap and maybe kill him. Not only that, but that Lalo would be trying to kill Saul over something that Saul is blaming Nacho for. So at some point, either Saul or Nacho are going to do something to piss off Lalo. We don't know what. And we know that it's going to be bad enough that many years later, Lalo would have some incentive to come hurt, kill, or threaten Jimmy or Saul.
That's crazy. If Saul was kidnapped in season 2 of Breaking Bad and he thinks that that's because of something that Lalo or Nacho, or if he thinks that that's because of something Nacho did, then it must have been something that happened recently, which would put it pretty far into the future from what we're seeing right now. So this might just be the beginnings of it, but that's crazy.
Or it's something that happens soon, but is so bad that for years later, Jimmy's looking over his shoulder wondering if someone's going to come kill him.
Potentially. I wanted to believe that line in Breaking Bad is evidence that Nacho's still around, but it actually could be that Saul sees Nacho as a good person to blame because he's not around. So might as well throw the blame on him. But that's crazy. That's awesome that we're starting to see all these threads connect with Breaking Bad. Can't wait to see where that goes next. You and I were concerned about Eduardo. Right? He seems like he's up to no good. Well, I was going to say I think that I rewatched the scene. We don't have anything to worry about because he tells Nacho, "I'm here to lend a helping hand, make sure the business is running in order. You know, I've got a good head for numbers. It's going to be like I'm not even here." So, I think we're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we got nothing to worry about.
Eduardo goes and sits down with Domingo and one of his compatriots and then tells Nacho to come over. That's where the episode ends. So obviously I was being facetious. I don't trust this Eduardo guy. I don't really know what he's up to. I think last in the instant take, I speculated that maybe he's somebody who's functioning independently. He heard about what happened to Hector and he sees an opportunity to swoop in. Watching it again, he makes a comment where he says, "They told me you were smart," in reference to Nacho. Using the word "they" makes me think that he was sent here. So it could be that somehow Hector got the word out. We know that he can somewhat communicate at this point. Maybe he had the cousins, the twins, help him bring in Eduardo because he needs somebody to help him run the business. And maybe that's the role Eduardo's playing. If I had to speculate further, I'd say that maybe Eduardo starts to suspect what Nacho did to Hector, and maybe that's how he's going to become a big problem here.
It could be, or it's possible that since Nacho is stuck as basically a double agent here, there is a chance that the Salamancas are watching him and see, okay, what's he doing with Gus?
That's true. There's a lot to be suspicious of. It could be the originating event where Nacho hurt Hector, or it could be that they're beginning to suspect he's a double agent.
And for me, the most exciting thing about all of this is now we know for sure that somehow Jimmy gets involved.
Yeah, that's mind-blowing. See that? We're connecting dots for you. Even when one of the dots is in Better Call Saul and the other dot is in Breaking Bad.
Multi-dimensional dot connecting.
Connecting. I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
And this is Saulcast.
I think there are more Better Call Saul numbers. Maybe we want to do another one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if you tried this one, but I have one you could try.
Okay.
Did you try the one that's on his business cards?
I don't think so.
505-503-4455.
All right, I'm dialing.
Hello, hola, yate. You called Saul. You've reached the offices of Saul Goodman and Associates, your one-stop shop for all things law. If they've accused you of breaking bad, better call Saul. If you're currently under arrest or in custody, follow my 3 patented rules. 1, keep your mouth shut. 2, keep your mouth shut. 3, don't make eye contact with anyone in a holding cell, unless you're looking to make a love connection. Visit my website for more free advice. BetterCallSaul.com. The solution to your problems is just minutes away. Your call is important to us. Please continue to hold. Drug felonies, press 1. DUI, press
I love that it's playing the America
press 3.
music in the background.
Animal smuggling, press 4. Unreasonably hot fast food beverage accidents, press 5.
Yeah, that one's no joke, by the way. That woman really had serious burns.
To continue this
It's
message
true.
in Tagalog, press star.
Which option should we go with?
Your call is important to us. Please continue to
Let's hit
hold.
1. I didn't do anything.
The cops won't let you hold anymore? You're running out of quarters? Look, if you're going to break bad, you got to be prepared. For more free legal advice, head to my website, BetterCallSaul.com.
Also, Saulcast.com. Hello? Oh. All right.
Saul is really into toilet humor.
Did he make toilet humor on that?
He just made a joke there about you don't want to make too much eye contact with someone else in your prison cell. And then earlier in this episode when he's on the bus and he doesn't want someone to sit next to him, he's like, "Yeah, you can sit here. Just so you know, I just ate a bunch of chili cheese fries and yeah."
With onions on them.
Yeah, there you go. I would say he makes a toilet style joke almost every episode if you watch for it. He's really into bodily functions.
Remember how he got arrested? The Chicago sunroof?
Oh yeah.
My name is Werner. You might know me because my father created the Sydney Opera House. I love listening to Saulcast. Make sure to write a review or give a rating in Apple's podcast app.
We also love all the emails we've been getting at our email address, saulcastbros@gmail.com. You guys keep sending in your theories, and a lot of them have come true, and it's really exciting to see what a smart audience we have. And don't forget to tweet us your theories, too, if you want everyone else to see them. We can discuss them out in the open at SaulcastPod on Twitter. We'll connect any dot you want.
Consider the dots connected. Yeah?
Yeah.